And I hope my talk won't be too gloomy about the future in terms of both the challenges and the opportunities we face. So I'm Simon Jackman. I'm head of what we call knowledge exchange, which is a term which really means the interaction between the research base that we would fund and the users of that research, whether it be within business or policymakers or internationally as well. And my job is to enable NERC-funded science to make the most, to be most used by society and make the most difference in the world around us. So it's therefore very good to be talking to yourselves today about this issue, particularly focusing on water. But I'd also like to mention that I picked this up off the BBC News website just before I left this morning. There's been a report come out on biodiversity, the TEEB report, which some of you may be aware of, about nature's sting and the real cost of damaging planet Earth. Some economists have worked with some biologists and biodiversity scientists to try and understand the issues that we face in terms of biodiversity loss, and that's an up-and-coming area that we're working on as well. So I just chipped that in because it was on the front page of the BBC website this morning. So I come from the Natural Environment Research Council. In the UK we have 7 research councils that fund different types of research. You've probably heard of the Medical Research Council or Engineering and Physical Sciences. We're the guys that fund the environmental lot. So I'm going to tell you a couple of points about NERC and then what kind of water data are we generating, and also some information that we've gathered from people like yourselves and others about your needs in terms of water data, in order to give us some ideas of the relevance of the data we've got and some thoughts on the way we may be able to take things forward in the future. I must say we're in the early stages, I think, of an engagement with Michael's team and others in the London Accord and elsewhere to try and take forward how the science base can work more effectively with the business community, particularly around the City of London. So who are we again? We're the largest funder of environmental research in the UK. And we fund that and also training. So if people are doing a doctorate or a master's, it's quite likely that they're being funded by ourselves. And we fund the knowledge exchange that exchanges that knowledge with the outside world, the user community. We spend about 400 million a year at the moment, waiting on next week to see how much that'll be. We fund a lot of universities across the UK and also 4 wholly owned centres, which are our major centres of expertise in different areas of environmental science. A couple of colleagues of mine down in the audience are from our Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. So they're the guys who look at biodiversity and also water systems in particular. We also own the British Antarctic Survey, which has also established a base up in the Arctic, so we're doing a lot of ice-based research as well. We fund the British Geological Survey, which has both mapped the UK's geology but also helped to map other countries. So recently they've just done a survey of Afghanistan and found an awful lot of copper in Afghanistan that may be able to be exploited in the future. So they act on a global level, just like the US Geological Survey does. And we also have a National Oceanographic Centre for the oceanic research that we conduct. So we cover those areas, those centres cover most areas of the environment. And really I'm just going to be honing down onto one of those. We work in partnership very closely across Europe and with many other countries as well. We just recently have funded a few different programmes. I just wanted to mention these just very quickly. You can get more details if you're really interested. We funded a changing water cycle programme, trying to understand the Earth's systems and how we can predict over decades where precipitation will be and where transpiration, soil moisture, hydrological storage, technical words that mean predicting where the water will be and what the water type processes will be over the next few decades. We've done a lot of climate modelling that can tell us what's happening in 50 to 100 years' time. This is trying to get down to decades, tens of years' time. And this is actually working in different regions of the world. So we've got a collaboration with the Indian government on the monsoon and how that is going to be changing over the coming decades. At the same time, you can't really divorce water from biodiversity and what we're calling ecosystem services, which are the way that nature provides services that man makes use of. And so we've got a major programme on that, trying to understand biodiversity and how we can value it as well. So there's a valuation network we're just establishing, which if people are interested in how you value biodiversity, come and see me afterwards and we can talk about how you can engage in that. We have a lot of scientists interested in that, and we want more and more people from the business community who understand what difference that'll make to them. We also, over the last few years, have had a major program on flood risk. We work very closely with the Environment Agency and with the Met Office on flooding. So after floods a few years ago, they set up a National Flood Forecasting Centre in London, jointly between the Environment Agency and the Met Office, so that we could predict flooding much more quickly. And in the last set of floods, which I think was 2007, we were giving much better forward prediction of flooding by the hour than we'd ever given before, and that was based on some of the land use maps that we provided into that system. So there's real immediate impact from the sort of work that we're doing in that particular area. And that obviously links us across to many people in the city who are interested in insurance and extreme events. What we have done recently is to talk with people within the financial services sector about the needs of the sector in terms of data, and found that whether you are investors, traders or guarantors, there's need for information on how we value changes in supply and effect on the output and returns from those systems. In terms of existence, there's a need for information data on surface and groundwater volumes, and the ability to cross-check data as well. And then in terms of benefits, we're talking about the availability under a variety of different abstraction scenarios. Abstraction being how much water we actually take out of the system. What will the availability be under those conditions? We're also looking at comparative analyses for scarcity for each utility, and comparative risk assessments as well in terms of multiple scenarios. So there's a lot of need we've picked up for data amongst the financial services sector. It would be useful today if later on, when we have our discussions, we maybe get some feedback from yourselves as to whether you think that's a correct sort of picture, or whether you've got other ideas of where data might be needed. Moving on from that, I want to give you a few pictures and illustrations of the sort of work we've been doing. And I mentioned earlier about a couple of colleagues from the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. This is really work that they've been doing as part of the UK's research effort in this area. So we've got new methods, data sets and tools that we've been developing, and the credit goes to the people on the screen and not to myself directly. We, over the last few years, have been developing what we've called a grid-to-grid model. And as you can see from the writing on that, it contains historical, current and future estimates of river flow, runoff, soil moisture, how we can keep how much capacity the soil has for moisture, which is actually a critical determinant of whether flooding will occur and where water flows as well. And from that, indicative flooding as well. And we can do this on daily or sub-hourly time series, with the outputs being on a 1 kilometre grid. So you can see how we're modelling here. We've got a system where you can model both surface water and groundwater. In other words, that's all of the water in the system that we're talking about. And we've used this across a range of sites in the UK. So this has been well and truly tested. We've actually applied it also under climate change scenarios. Now, maybe a little bit difficult to get all of the colours right on there in terms of what you can see from the audience. But this is a worked example based on the year 2080. I know that's a bit of a long way away, but what we're seeing there is already that there's differences which are in part reflected by the soil types, hence I was mentioning about soil moisture earlier, and the type of bedrock, whether it's chalk or other things. So what we're finding is that there's actually a decrease in water flows you can see in the southeast and up into the Midlands, and an increase of water flows in Scotland and the northwest of England in particular. And so these are changes in peak river flows, and this gives us an indication of the vulnerability of these particular environments over time. Focusing on Wales. I don't know whether anyone's here from Wales. But This is an example, really, of what we've been doing. And I need to get this right because it's important that you understand exactly what we've been doing. This is where the desired target is historical trends, which we can then relate to climate change scenarios. So we have overlaid the information that we've got on water levels onto the actual regional maps. And these can actually be used to then identify industries which may have vulnerabilities. So if you look at the centre top diagram, the soil moisture map in the middle there, in terms of soil moisture deficit in millimetres from 2008, you can see we can get some information here about the issues to do with water levels in those regions of Wales. In the bottom right, we've got low flows under a future climate scenario. So you can see the reds are the lowest flows, the blues are the higher flows. And this is about median outputs of the model. So these are not averages, these are medians. And we can actually give error bars associated with these to tell you how much the flows will be. So this is future and indicates where the issues may well be in terms of river flows over the decades in the future. So that's a very important thing. And then on the top right, we've actually combined that with future predictions of urban growth. So this is demographic models overlaid upon water models to further give an indication of where we're going to have peak changes, percentage changes in peak flows, which you can see from the diagram. So I'm trying to just give you an illustration of what we can do and how we can build up the data into more and more interesting data sets as you move forward. So the top right, bringing demographics in as well provides that extra colour, you could say, to the map. We can also combine this with a broader model, and this is we've called the Joules model, which I'll show you in a minute. But it's bringing a global and a regional, such as European, model into play, because you've looked so far at Wales and the UK. This is an opportunity that's looking at maps that are much broader than that. Unfortunately, the quality of the data when we move away from the UK and a small number of other countries is lower, simply because we don't have the data which we would like in those countries. So typically, as it says here, UK data is at the 1 kilometre scale, very accurate. Regional data sets tend to be at the 25 kilometre scale, and then when you get to the global, it's out at the 100k scale. So Joules is the joint UK land environment simulator, and actually we've put in a number of different parameters here to determine what's happening with the water. So we've got the temperature, we've also got wind speed, humidity, and different types of radiation, long wave and short wave radiation, and in addition to that, precipitation. And from that system, we can then understand the different movements of the water, and we can get to a point where we can understand the relevant water systems and where the water is. So we end up with a wetland area there where we've calculated the relevant flows of water in and out of that wetland arising from the river systems as well. So this is a well integrated model that we've been using, and we've actually been able to take this and operate it at a larger scale right away across the globe. So this map actually shows you a whole global model of using the Joules system. And we've tested it against several databases, and as far as we can determine, the model's efficiency is 0.71 if 1 were the perfect model. It will be interesting to know from yourselves whether you think that is sufficient level of quality for the system you might be wanting to operate. Is 0.71 as an efficiency sufficient? If it's not, would you consider using this now, or would you like a better system? But this shows you the hydrological modelling across the globe. At the same time, we've also been operating or running a European project called Watch, which actually takes the hydrological and climate data together and looks at both the 20th century global water cycle, then moving across into the 21st century, and assesses the vulnerability of our water resources, and then makes recommendations on how we should manage those water resources, how we should train people, and how we should disseminate the sort of knowledge that we're pulling together. So what we've done here is bring together the hydrological, water resources and climate change communities. These guys speak different languages, but we're trying to integrate the way they work together in order to get us the data and information that we really need in order to make decisions. At the same time, we are analysing and describing the current global water cycle. That's also quite a challenge. And then evaluating how that water cycle and its extremes respond to future drivers of global change. And in the end, we're going to get feedbacks into the coupled system and look at how this affects the water cycle. And also, we will determine the uncertainty and the predictions that we've achieved. And this will lead to a modelling framework to assess future vulnerability of resources. And this is just one output from Watch, which is a soil moisture map for the globe. As you can see, this is with climate change involved, and as you can see, the soil moisture levels are incredibly low. Greenland, by the way, is brown there. We've set that at 0 because it just has ice cover over it. So if you think there's a peculiarity there, that's because of that. But the soil moisture is difficult to describe because if you imagine it, it's a 3D process with water entering at the top layer and slowly penetrating to deeper depths. So this is quite a challenging thing to measure. And it decreases by water leaving the soil either by evapotranspiration, water leaving upwards out of the soil largely, or by penetrating to depth and recharging groundwater storage systems or stores. And the two key sources of water in the soil are obviously rainfall and also snow melt. So particularly up the top in the higher latitudes, you can see the snow melt and what effect that's had. And on a global scale, these changes in soil moisture depend also on the season and also the climate zone as well. Hence, we're having to bring the climate and water people together. What would be interesting would be to see how this output changes when applied to any one organisation's expected climate scenarios, whether they're ourselves or others. And this we can currently do at a regional level with a 25-kilometre grid, with the usual caveats in terms of quality of data. But we would also like to look at this with, potentially you could look at this with forests as well. So if you overlaid GIS maps of forests, together with soil moisture, together with windstorm and ice storm data sets, we could use this sort of data potentially for forest pricing and for forest management systems as well. So this underpins a lot of the information that you would need in order to achieve that. So that would be an interesting question for the audience, whether you're interested in forests and forest trading or forest valuation. The soil moisture content is fundamental to understanding that moving forward. I want to leave you with a few comments about what we're planning to do for the future. NERC, Natural Environment Research Council, are very keen to ensure that the sort of knowledge we're generating is relevant to people who can use it, but also we communicate and disseminate that effectively, and we get people engaged right at the outset of some of the projects which we're developing over coming years. What we're establishing is a couple of networks. One to do with uncertainty and risk, which inevitably will be driven more by the insurance sector, but also we would appreciate inputs from across the financial services sector and others. The Environment Agency are taking a keen interest in this and looking at the models that we will use for risk management of flooding and the environment. We're also setting up a valuation and risk network, which is going to look much more at the valuation of the environment. As I mentioned, the report that's come out today on biodiversity, there's a lot of interest on valuing the environment. And we're keen to, again, engage people in that network to ensure that the knowledge that we've got is getting out to the right people. And this relates in the broader circle. So the central circle is what we're doing. The broader circle is the reinsurance community, who we've already been working with extensively around catastrophe risk models, because the sort of work that we've been doing, we've been identifying the uncertainties associated with these models for a number of years and predicting things like the correlation effects in different storm systems. And so natural hazard catastrophe modelling is one of the key areas, but we believe there's also a real opportunity in terms of environmental and social governance and also in terms of corporate social responsibility and people investing and managing businesses in that area, and also the socially responsible investing community. So we're very interested to see what you would like out of the sort of work that we're doing. You've seen a few snapshots really of the sort of work we're doing and the sort of capabilities we've got. But that's only a snapshot. There's an awful lot more we could be doing. So I'd be very interested to hear from you anything further. So I don't think we're going to have questions now, are we, Michael? But if you want to ask any, then please do later. Thank you.